All right. Good morning, everyone. This is Youngstown's Talk Channel. You just have me, Joe, today. Kellen is off feeding the medical machine, and so she'll be joining us next week. Tomorrow, we have lined up the MLO Bros will be back, part two of the what's his name, Michael Khan, the CEO of the Southern Park Mall. So we'll hear an update, things that happen. I'm not going to spoil their news item, but you'll hear about that ongoing story as we progress. 330-595-1600 is the phone number. If you want to call the program today and talk anything in politics, any current events, any local news, feel free. You can also comment to this show, and I'll respond and share your comments within. So thanks everybody for joining us. I feel that local talk radio is such an important tool to give the citizens the ability to share their thoughts. I mean, there are only so many ways that you can file grievances in the community, only so many ways that your opinion can be known. And I'm a true believer in there should be many avenues for regular people, and not necessarily for it to be always acted on, but sometimes just letting everyone know just how displeased you are is enough. So first story I want to start off with is on the national scene. The mayor of New York, a primary was just run for, I believe it was Cuomo, and I don't even know this dude's name. I know it's the most controversial part of this story is that he's a Muslim socialist. And I want to take those two terms and separate them. And which of the two are more, do you see most conflict with? Whether he is a Muslim or that he is a socialist. And I'll share my thoughts. Like on the Muslim side of things, I mean, do you feel that different religions are incompatible with our culture? If you look around the national stage in Congress, we have some devout Muslims. One from Somalia comes to mind that doesn't like this country all that much, is representing Somalia and the religion more than the constituents. Or maybe not. Maybe Minnesota has a constituency base that Muslims need to be represented, just like Christians, just like any other group. So the Muslim part doesn't concern me as much. If you will agree that there's no compatibility issues, can you operate in the best interest of the people that you represent without taking a singular group and making it sort of like an approach where that's the only group that you are representing? There are Muslims that live within my development, and they are good, cool people, and I have no problem with your choice of religion making you able to participate in a community. Now, there are fringe Muslims, and it's important that we make sure that people we elect within our government aren't one of these fringe groups. So I guess it's a fair question. Is it the Sharia law? Is it the fatwa? Is it where they declare war on non-Muslims? I mean, if you're one of those fringe groups, then I think it matters less about being Muslim and more, are you an extremist? So I think that's a fair question to ask from the mayor or the would-be contender for the mayor of New York City. And the second part of that is socialist. That one concerns me more than the Muslim, for sure. And, as a philosophy, and I don't have a problem with, democratic, socialist, extreme parties. And usually they're wholly rejected by the population that are being governed because they know what that freaking means. And they're, and I know, Bernie Sanders was derailed by his own party because, they believe that, what he had to say would not resonate and would not make him a good contender. So they took him out of the equation, unfairly, if you ask me. But still, I'd love to see a socialist try to make broad appeal across the country, and the rejection would underscore how we feel about a capitalist society versus a socialist society. simply based on wherever socialism is tried, it is an utter failure. And so, and I don't think the Bernie Sanders of the world's the real extreme socialism. Now, socialism light, I mean, you can float those ideas, and even though they don't make mathematical sense, they have emotional appeal, and they definitely have an audience that you give free shit away, and a lot of people will sign up for that. But it's not by chance that socialists go after concentrations of wealth. Like, you don't see thieves, right? You don't see thieves go to areas where there's nothing to steal. And so the socialist philosophy wants to confiscate property. And where do you go? Where their property is aplenty. Now, I don't know how New Yorkers feel about this, but, you know, as much as I dislike Cuomo and everything about him, I think that he would have been in the safer bet. But, you know, socialism is the bank robbers, the bandits that, you know, grab your covered wagon and your and steal all of your stuff. It's just done through political and philosophical means rather than stick you up with a mask over your face kind of thing. And so my fear for New York is, you know, it's a city. You go to other countries and you see people wearing "I love New York." Its branding is that it is the internationally known city as a model of what capitalism can bring and success can bring and prosperity can bring. And I think you kind of take that for granted. What makes an area prosperous, and if you kind of erode the reasons why you're successful, you will not be successful for long. Now, same thing happened in California. We have some very liberal cities that are toying with, you know, majestic socialism, and there's a whole lot of downside. And the people who live there suffered socialism rule or socialism light rule, but they don't learn that, you know, the costs of that are what is the contributing factor in making it miserable for the people who have to live there. And so you have this mass exodus of wealth, you have this mass exodus of innovation, and they go to other states. And in those states, you have lots of, you know, liberal blue voters. And when you get a bunch of them that leave those states, you lose a lot of the voting block, where New York and California was a, you know, 100% shot to vote Democrat almost in every election. But you give a lot of those voters a reason to leave, and does it change the political landscape where, you know, California and New York become less blue, and other states that might have been deep red become a little bit more purple, or even if blue? Like, I can see Tennessee and Florida being, you know, where I would jump ship if I were in that predicament. Now, do you get a bunch of liberal voters that hit these Republican hotspots and change that political landscape as well? So I would protect and preserve. If I'm the governor of a state and I see something like this happen, like, what do you do? If the popular appeal of socialism, the only thing you can do is try to, you know, market in the other direction, where New York's awesome because of its, because of its prosperity, right? Wait, did I just do a circular reasoning? It is successful because of its philosophy on capitalism and selling products and doing services and being an economic powerhouse. And when the socialist approach is like, okay, well, the oranges are on the tree, let's go grab the oranges. But if you lose the people who create the prosperity, it becomes less prosperous, right? I mean, it's a mathematical certainty. And so, can New York withstand a socialist shaking down the wealth of a city? And can it survive the exodus of the people who made that prosperity in the first place? So that's the question. 330-595-1600 is the phone number if you want to call. If you want to comment, please share your opinion with me, and I will read it during the show today. And the second part of that, the socialism, you know, point through the Biden administration, they had made a big effort about forgiving student loan debt. Now, with the Trump administration, they are going to be starting to capture some of those loans back, those federally backed loans. And August 1st or the beginning of August seems like when they're going to resume trying to collect the loans that these kids agreed to pay for their education, that ultimately won't be a forgivable loan. It will be something that the government's going to claw back. So I want to talk a little bit about student loan debt and whether or not you think that it's something worthwhile that we hold kids and institutions accountable for the loans that they've signed. There's going to be, I mean, think about it. Since COVID, you had a lot of these kids that were able to delay their loan repayments for sometimes years, not having to pay their obligation. And now all of a sudden, a big expense is going to drop right down into the spreadsheet again. And it's going to put some people in peril. And I know they were hopeful that it would be forgiven, but what about forgiving that loan? Seems like it is a strategy, right? A good strategy. I mean, think of any other product that is sold in the United States. If you're not happy with it and you don't value it, the FTC will protect you and claw your money back, right? And so why is student loans any different, where the college got paid for a terrible product and the end user bought a product that they would absolutely, go to the Best Buy return desk and get their money back if they could. So the socialists and the people who think that the educational product, through noble means. I mean, you want to have an educated society, but you also want to connect it with the utility of being usable in the market. So your classes and the document that you have on the wall needs to bring in more money than it costs you. And if we just sort of like commoditize education and make sure everybody, can get a free education at the college end, well, we got to ensure that we're getting a good product, number one, because if the taxpayers are front loading and, carrying the financial burden, do they agree with the education that they are making happen? So if you forgive the loan, the taxpayers did it. And would they be happy having given the classes and the education and the, what you selected as your profession? Or the people that front the bill get a little bit of say in what you choose. Like, do I want to pay for your basket weaving course or something where you're using sort of like a pursuit of creativity rather than utility? I probably wouldn't. It would almost be like you go to the grocery store and there's stuff that the public's cool with subsidizing, like fruits, vegetables, meats, stuff that's necessary. And anything above that, like, you can still buy it, but it can't be on the taxpayer dime, especially if it's unhealthy for you or it's part of a strategic political advantage. If I can capture you and make you into a Democrat, into a voter, like, that's not something a Republican would be, happy about paying for. So I think, the colleges have a really good thing. They have a slippery, perfect slide right into their institution, insured by, lower education pushing them into college. And then you have a government that makes sure that there's no obstacles in getting you there. If you can't afford it, we'll figure it out later and, saddle you with a bunch of debt. But all we've really done is create this massive bubble of paper, almost like the housing crisis. We have a student loan debt crisis, and these kids are having hundreds of thousands of dollars or up to $100,000 in some cases that they're going to be paying for the rest of their freaking life. And so obviously math is not taught before you enter into loan agreements. I think that should be a prerequisite into signing, the next 30 or 40 years of your life away to a financial obligation, is if you have a proper understanding of what it is that you're doing. And I guess we don't hate it enough, because I bet you yesterday we signed off on some more of those loans and saddled the next generation into the same exact predicament. So as much as you think that these loans are predatory and it's unfair, if you issue more of them, then you don't really believe that. You would say, don't take loans, only pay for the education that you can afford, go for grants and, good grades and seek other methods. But we just commoditized it. We thought it was a good idea to just give everybody access to a free education. And it became very unserious, where the utility of that piece of paper on the wall diminished over time. As an employer, how much emphasis do I put on you having a degree? Well, a degree means that you can hang in there and do something for a long period of time and stay dedicated and get good grades, right? That's one element. But are you able to think? Are you able to reason? Are you able to, use a practical decision making in the marketplace? Well, I think that a lot of the college educated people that come down to me, it works. They're harder to sort of like invoke critical thinking. They're good memorizers and they're good test takers for sure. But in the real world, where you have to make good decisions, I think a lot of the common sense and critical decision making is very much lacking. And so if you paid $100,000 for that, you got freaking ripped off. So yes, I do believe that anybody that wants education, there should not be a physical obstacle put in front of them. If they work hard and they work through it, get jobs, really, you value it so much, you're willing to walk uphill in the snow barefoot to be able to get it. When you make it convenient, it's not taken seriously. And you have a lot of these people that, honestly, for what they got value wise, they got ripped off. And so August, that comes around where these kids will start having to make those payments again. And, it continues. I don't agree that they should be just forgiven, but here's the one mathematical approach that I will support. If you borrowed money from someone and the terms have changed, where either you've paid twice what you borrowed and the interest is taking a hammer to you, right? The portions of it that make it really bad for the consumer are the deferred payments, where interest is accumulating when you are not taking any chunks out of the principal. And I don't care if you just pay the interest so that the dollar fit, that kind of floats you until you get to a certain point. But I think if we do anything, we give some reprieve on the interest side of things, where we don't forgive the obligation because that's theirs wholly. Taxpayer doesn't get anything out of it. But if we can do some reprieve on the interest part, it will make it more palatable for a kid going to school, working to pay for their education. They can actually keep up with the debt that's accumulating as they do that. So I think that would be a fair compromise, is that we the government can interject. It wouldn't be the trillions of dollars, it would be the billions of dollars to cover some of the interest. And I think taxpayers would say okay to that, so long that you don't create another generation. You don't give a loan where the student pays nothing for it. The student has to, get off their ass, and they have to put some skin in the game and work a couple jobs to at least pay the interest that they have every month. And I think you take it a little bit serious when there's some obligation on your side. But the socialist mindset is that we're spoiled rotten and we want to be catered to. And the effort that we put in is in compared to what our predecessors were willing to put in to have stuff. Like we're just lazy, entitled people. And socialism just creates more of that. Like what about taking other people's stuff? I know where it's appealing, you get to steal from it and you make a legal way of doing it. But from the person being stolen from, like you take exception to people coming along and just taking your stuff. So 330-595-1600 is the phone number. You can also comment on here if you want to, honestly, the stuff that I say, if you got a different angle on it, throw it at me. I'll argue with it. And I'm willing to take on new information. So if I'm really missing something, not the sob stories don't do anything for me. The plight of the person that's already in the bad predicament, I can't do much about. I'm going to say, get in your time machine, go back to before you signed it, and find another way. If I could tell you that that's what this would be like if you sign that document, you might make a different decision. But again, as long as kids are making that same decision today, then we're just creating problems, sometime in the future. Local story. We've had such a heat wave in Northeast Ohio right now. We've had 90 plus degrees days, and I absolutely love the heat. I mean, in February, I leave Ohio when it's in its 20s and I go to the warmest spot that I can freaking get to. I love the heat and the sun. I'm not one of those people who complain that it's just too hot and things are too sweaty or whatever. So I love it. But we live in an aged community. We live in some low income communities. I have air conditioning. If I do get hot, I can go into a room and cool it down a little bit so it's not terrible. There's some apartment complexes that are in low income areas that do not have air conditioning. And so I don't know if you've ever been in like a loft or second floor, third floor, fifth floor, but if you get to the 16th floor of a building and heat rises, you can have an apartment that is 100 degrees. And a couple days ago, I worked doing a technology install in an office that was being built on a second floor that didn't have yet ventilation or air conditioning. And it was a freaking sweatbox. I worked for probably an hour and it was extremely uncomfortable. And so the argument is that if you have low income housing or you have an apartment complex, what is the sort of like the obligation or the responsibility of a landlord that on these days that you don't have a place that's unlivable from temperature standards, right? I read this article. This was on WFMJ yesterday, and some of the accounts from some of the people who live there, like pets are suffering. The people who live there are suffering. What would you do if you were in that spot? Would you move? Would you go to a climate that is less hot? Would you get a hotel room and survive the 3 days of that? What would you do? And as a kid, I remember we'd have central air. We didn't have air conditioning. And so my deal was that if you stayed inside, it was going to be freaking hot. So you went outside and you avoided being indoors. And then when the sun went down, put the little fan in the window to blow the outside colder air in there. And you cooled your room down to, instead of being the 90s, it was like 83 rather than 93. And that was it. You adapted to that. But I think we're really unhealthy. And there's a lot of people whose health is put in jeopardy and they are just not healthy enough to go outside and escape the heat and humidity, or, don't have the resources to be able to do it. So they're kind of stuck. And the reason I couple this with the socialist deal is when you create these dependencies on people, then their plight becomes your plight. You took care of them up to a certain point, and now they're yours. If you created lots of frictions where everybody was used to adapting to changes and they were nimble and they were mobile, then you'd slap your stuff in the covered wagon and you would move out of the territory. So if there was famine, you move from the famine. And the argument that it's unescapable or people just can't do that is just evidence. Well, it was a bad plan in the beginning. We felt like we were doing something good for people, but then once you come responsible, you start feeding the wild animal and the wild animal gets dependent on you. You're the jerk once you stop feeding the animal. So it's like, it's yours. You broke it. You bought it, kind of thing. So what is it that you do? And I would love for, the people who advocate for this to then come through on the other part of the responsibility. So those people should be putting up the dollars and, satisfying those needs. And we're a charitable community. I think probably all the places I've done business, I think the people, when they're asked to do something, they stand up and satisfy that. And I think we get, we before we were used to, when you're in a bad spot, you talk to your church and your community and your neighbors, and those people are there for you because you're there for them when they need you. And the community is, we solve our problems with the people that are around us instead of looking up at the noble God of government. And when you get in a spot, you hope the government will save you from your predicament. And I think, we do have a true opportunity to get more on a local level in a better community. And, somebody called me today and said, I live on the 16th floor. I think it'd be pretty likely that I can go grab a air conditioner and pay, a month's worth of electricity bills to cool your apartment down by 10 degrees or something like that. I can go to Walmart. I think probably for $100, I can grab one of those suckers. But how many more people have that state of mind that they'd be willing to do that for somebody without payback? It's just a charitable gift to someone who was in need without involving the government controllers that then create more dependency with you. And that's a lot of my political philosophy is I want things to be hard enough so you don't forget how to live, how to survive, how to push back against, the frictions that are natural. Like, how did we get in this spot where a species that was so capable of surviving now, like, is so vulnerable to so many different forces? And again, it's just sort of a warning that a little disappointed in, in community and in the responsibilities of government when they're just so bad at taking care of people once they've, domesticated them, and, taken control of their lives. So 330-595-1600. You can also comment during the show and I will read it. We had a good bit, John Bellino last week. We had a good bit of counter arguments and a little bit of debate that heard from the other side a little bit. And I kind of want more of that. I want, if you're going to be a good representation, when I used to sit in on 570, the callers were about split, right? They were Republicans that would call in and they would voice their opinions on one side, and the Democrats, same thing. It was a lot of repetition. There wasn't a whole lot of, new thoughts to put into it. Everybody gets upset and they read the news articles and then they just parrot what the commentators have said. So there wasn't a whole lot of original engineering, but I'm totally willing for people to, to share their actual perspective, not their adopted perspective from, a pundit of some kind. But if you got a feeling like, the Bernie Sanders stuff, I understand completely where you want to take care of other people. You have the empathy. You could feel for the plight of other people. And that's great. And there's what you do about it that I might have some disagreement with. Julie says, if you are a landlord, you have an obligation to make your properties livable. As long as that livability, is in the rent, right? And so if you take a cabin in the woods, you took a cabin in the woods for the price and you knew that it doesn't have luxuries versus paying for all of the extra conveniences like, plumbing and running water. So you make the compromise when you're willing to see or willing to pay for the thing that you are using from the landlord. I see the argument a lot about landlords about raising rents. And then, the people who are tenants say, well, why did my rent go up 20% when I didn't get 20% more value out of it? They didn't make any improvements. I still got a drip faucet and whatever. So the obligation of selling a product, cool. Like anywhere else in the world, if you're unhappy with the conditions, you have two choices. Go find other conditions and see if there's somebody who will definitely take that deal, right? So if it goes too expensive, I can cancel the subscription. I can't then demand that someone do something unless you have a contract to do something that I want them to do. Leaving is really my only option. And if I have a waiting list of people who are willing to pay me $500 for something and you're paying me $400 and we get to the end of the contract and I'm like, hey, I'm raising your rent to $500. You're not going to be pleased that I don't want to sign a new one with you when I got a line of people willing to pay me more. But consumers sort of have, they know that they know the value. They know what they would do in that position. They would leverage more money versus less money. And so operating and expecting landlords to do something that you wouldn't do as a consumer would be asking, quite a lot. Thank you, sir. So, and when you talk to the tenant that just is barely making ends meet and the rent goes up by 100, I understand the defensiveness of like, well, what do I get? And that's the adaptability of people to know that you got to kind of line up where you're going to live. Now, you can make the argument that if there is a lack of housing that is in your price range. So I remember when we did the cars for cash thing, where we wanted to get a bunch of used cars off of you can trade in your used car and get money for it. And then they would just scrap it, and got tons of low end $500 cars off of the market, right? They wanted you to buy new cars. So it was a great experiment, but the used car market plummeted. So if I was going to the car market, I'm like, okay, I got my $500 saved. That's my entry level car. It's going to be a beater. If there are no $500 cars, then yeah, you're stuck. And so having the economy and the marketplace have a product that there is a demand for means that there's got to be some kind of restriction or policy that sort of eliminated certain things from the marketplace. So why isn't there a rustic apartment without air conditioning for $200? Right. So there's got to be a reason why it's not feasible, financially feasible for a landlord to host it, where there's not enough money. Nobody's willing to invest in that. So if we had to subsidize some housing, so this plan got circulated a couple of months ago, where you take some government land where government owns a ton of uninhabited land. I'm not talking state parks. I'm just uninhabited land. You take and cordon off some of these and you put up some housing that is in the marketplace. So you have private housing where investors can buy up properties and become a landlord through as an investment scheme. And then you have something that is, publicly owned, and the public can be a little bit more, not necessarily a for-profit endeavor, so they can be a little bit more at market value and cover their expenses. And I wouldn't be opposed to looking at the landscape of the marketplace, finding out where private money is not accumulating, and have a government initiative to do it. And I know it's rough to even hear this from me, because I don't think the government can do anything well. But if you truly have people that don't have any place to go and would end up in a tent and being unhoused because of the lack of private, privately sold housing, just not in the vein of affordability for you, then maybe the government subsidizes that and creates that, maybe offloads it down to private down the road. But if there's scarcity there, then maybe the government steps in and inspires some development. That I'll tell you this: I was approached a couple of years ago where a city had land bank, undeveloped land. So they tore down an old house and it's just sitting in city's ownership. And they're like, we have a real lack of single family homes in here, in this area. And they said, Joe, do you want to develop this and put up some single family homes? And I said, yeah, I'll give it a go. And so they made me an offering of the property, and it was extremely good offering. Almost no cost to be able to take the land. And then I did the single family home, spec'd it out, got a template cookie cutter, already designed, super efficient. And I took my materials cost and I went into this neighborhood and I took, what single family homes go for. And my build cost was higher than what the value is. So if I spent, I think it was $110,000 build cost, and the surrounding homes around this property was, in the 60s. And so I would take a cut in the value of a completed house because the materials were almost double what the value of the home would be. So as a landlord, do you have somebody finance the value of the asset or the build? How much would I have to charge? Well, it would almost, I could, if I can get materials cost close enough to the value of the house, then I could make it affordable. But based on those costs, I couldn't. There was a scarcity of resources at the time. Now, I don't know how things have changed. Maybe lumber's come down, maybe labor's come down, but it's a real problem if it costs more to build a house than the house is worth. Julie says, if a person finds their life unlivable in another country, don't come here looking for a better life. You will be arrested. Who would you put ahead? Would you put an unlivable life in this country versus we're already struggling with 20 million people who shouldn't even be here? Those are the people that are competing for these bottom rung resources. If you want housing to become more available, then take the people who shouldn't be here first. Take care of people who are citizens. make sure they all have proper housing, eliminating the competition for the jobs that they're doing and the homes that they're living in and the medical resources they're consuming. And then after we've taken care of the people who live here, then you can start introducing people who are coming from unlivable countries. And again, it's just, it's not the most, it's not the most accommodating policy. You want to be able to say, I've got extra resources. Then when you have extra resources, you give it away. But we do the opposite, where we don't have the extra resources, but we still, just we're entrenched in giving away stuff we don't have. Like if you had $37 trillion worth of debt, do you have any business whatsoever doing anything that wasn't absolutely necessary? No, you're $37 trillion in debt. You start giving stuff away when you have $37 trillion in money sitting in the bank. You give that away. Otherwise, it's not charitable by any means. You're just making one person more miserable and, scraping that asset off to somebody else. It's the confiscation of value from one person to the other. And if you're in a good position, I have no qualms about you giving the extra away to make sure other people, but you got to take care of your mask first before you start worrying about somebody else's mask. All right. 330-595-1600. Julie, thank you for floating questions at me. Me being the monologuing part is the hardest thing about talk radio. At least in talk radio, you got commercial breaks, right? You can conduct yourself and think what you're going to say next, and your phone calls coming in. So you're in need, Julie, for throwing topics at me, so giving me something to talk about, or else I'm just going to sort of ramble a little bit, and I don't want it to turn into that. So what else is on the news front? We touched on the Bernie Sanders interview from yesterday, and I think we hit all of our major targets. I got a lot of comments afterwards about, I think the belief in supporting what Bernie supports and the socialism that everybody insists will work if we just tried it because we do it really well here. I'm not convinced. And where I want to be convinced, like, AI was probably one topic we didn't hit, which Joe Rogan and Bernie Sanders hit pretty hard. What do you do, and what we'll use the dock workers in California. So in the dock workers contract, they're fighting heavy against automations. So you look across the different countries, they have automated docks where a ship comes in, the containers are lifted by automations. And then you go to our docks and it's manual, just it's people. And those workers have preserved the contract. If you want to do business with me, it's got to be human beings. I'm not going to contribute to my replacement by allowing you to offload things using automations, because I know if you do that, you're going to do more and more automations, and then I'm not going to have a job. And the movie actor, what is it, SAG, Actors and Guild, whatever, the union that does movie writers and actors and whatnot, they're fighting against the AI script writing and video creation, because they're in the same boat. What happens when the AI gets better at putting content out than I am? And so they specifically are reducing the influence of AI in their industry. So they are definitely fighting back, against it. And, when I think when we give in to all other industries like manufacturing, they have robotics, and you really didn't get much pushback. But there are some industries where inauthentically pushing back, and I think we lose that bid unless here's the greater deal. If you can make the human involvement give a higher value that the automation can. So if you take your spreadsheet and say, if I do automation, here's all the pros and cons. If I do human beings, here's all the pros and cons. And then put the responsibility on the laborers and the workers to make sure they are always outperforming what the robotics can do. So you want to key in on what the downsides of robotics is, and that has to be your selling point. And I want to pick you because it's a superior product, not because I'm forced to do it. And I think they eventually when it comes to us competing against other countries that do export import, that we lose that battle because, you're not going to keep that industry in control when other countries are like, dude, you're 20 times more expensive than us, all because you're not doing automation. There's somebody that's non-unionized that's going to eventually take up that demand. Julie says we have construction sites abandoned, crops rotting in the fields, farmers going out of business. So where are the good American citizens filling those jobs? Well, we became dependent over the last decade on workers that we up and rooted and kicked out. It's going to take a while before those companies figure out how to price their labor so that Americans will do those jobs. The argument that nobody will do these jobs, I don't really agree with. I think you can create a line, you can create a queue of people willing to do a job if you price it correctly. And the activity, I truly believe that hard work is a big contributor to mental health, gives you purpose. And so there are a lot of people who right now are like, hey, if I graduated high school, I would have totally gone into the mill if you'd have let me, if there were any mills to go into. I'm a hard worker, maybe not a brilliant thinker, but give me I got a strong back. I could do some work, just pay me well so that I could do this job and make a good bit. It's exploitative. And consumers did this, that we want cheap stuff. And in order to get cheap stuff, you got to exploit someone to get the cheap stuff. And we just happened to pick illegal immigrants because they didn't push back. They were hard workers and probably scared that we're going to get rid of them if they would complain. So, but I can't defend that. I can't take that meat packing plant. Those of you didn't hear the story, a guy had a meat packing plant. 75 of his workers were deported. He kind of looked around and said, what am I going to do? Like, all my workers are gone. I'm going to go out of business. Well, the decision to hire exploitative labor was where you made your mistake. And there's a meatpacking plant up the road from them, and they were cited in the same article, that hired all American workers. Not fair to them who followed the rules and only hiring people who should be here, where they're like rubbing their hands together. Like, finally, we're going to get rewarded for following the rules by getting all these other customers that might be paying a little bit more. But look, we got American workers here. So you would have to make the argument with me that there isn't an American at an American rate that would do these jobs. I think they would. And it's just going to take time now to get people willing to do those jobs and get the technology to be fielded at those jobs. It took 10 years, more than 10 years to cause the problem. It's not an instantaneous thing. Now, I will take the criticism that if you knew you were going to do this, you could put tariffs even in the same equation. If you knew you were going to do this, you knew that would be some of the fallout, and you could do some proper planning beforehand where you always have that laid out. So we tell people that here's the plan and protocol. We're going to get rid of illegals. So if you have illegals, here's what I want you to do. We don't want the crops to go bad in the fields, and we don't want to have construction projects that are abandoned and not being built. Start preparing right now. Take us really seriously. Start swapping out the people who are working. Adjust your prices. You got like 6 months to get your pricing in line, your labor force reconstructed. Here's an amnesty part of the program where we're going to let you start making the legal decisions. And then if you discarded those, then I don't feel bad for those construction projects at all. You knew it was coming and you didn't make any, decisions that would adapt your company into following procedure. I mean, we do this all the time in other industries. We change rules and regulations, and we give a runway for companies to be able to comply with whatever rules are coming down the pike next. And businesses are a way to orient themselves where they can project in the future, and they can say, what if I got a good deal on this? So I buy products and I'm getting it from Indonesia, and I can get it 10% cheaper, right? I think, what if I can't buy from Indonesia? Who would I get this from? And you're like, okay, well, I have to get this from someplace in North Carolina. Let's find out if I can get the same product. And if I can't get the same product, well, I need to be certain that I have a backup plan in case the good deal that I've been getting goes away and I could stay in business. So that's not good entrepreneurship. If you have a single source of labor, that labor is illegal, and you didn't have a backup plan for what to do if your illegal workers that you were exploiting, uh, all of a sudden can't do the jobs that are there. Because if Julie, I mean, you could be honest, if it happened to you, if you were in that predicament, preserving your business would be up there. Following the rules would be up there. You wouldn't want to break the law just so that you can, sell a tomato for 75 cents. You would want to sell a tomato for $3 and make sure that that was going towards somebody's livelihood that lives in your community. So thank you, Julie. 330-595-1600. And you can comment like Julie is. And Julie, I love the fact that you're willing to argue with me every single day. It's one of my favorite things. And I think Carter's missing from the equation today. And the Carter Julie dynamic is one of my favorite, favorite things as well too. This summer, a little bit of local stuff now. The summer entertainment. If you haven't noticed that we are back, baby. Like from everything from concert venues to even smaller concert venues, the outdoor amphitheaters, the indoor events. We're firing on all cylinders here, and I want to express my appreciation for the public for showing up. We kind of got changed a little bit in how willing we are to leave our house to support the promoters and the people who brought entertainment to our community. And I went to the Rock and Ribs Fest, Ribs and Rock Fest, Rocks and Ribs, whatever it is, in Boardman last weekend, and just to see who was setting up, what the vendors were like, what the food was like, and if there are people in the audience. And it was hot. Not the most, we go to this Canfield Fair, we know all about hot, but it was very much appreciated that the public is supporting these venues and going and enjoying music that these artists are putting together. They can only do they are the people with a creative bent that express themselves musically with artwork on a stage, whatever. They put so much work and time into providing a product. And I think it's one of the most undervalued expressions. And we work with a ton of musicians down here, and their plight is they love doing what they do, but it doesn't pay any of the bills. It's hard to monetize and make a living doing something that's in those creative industries. So if a kid said, I want to be, a rock star or a football player, or these really low probability that you're going to make a decent living, I have to consider that you might be doing what you love as a hobby. And every time you're setting up equipment and tearing down equipment and doing the hard work and on stage, and you get to the check at the end of the day, it's really, if consumers show up, these people make more money. And if they love the products on stage, don't try to get it for free. Don't try to deprive those artists of money. We want to pay up for the things that we enjoy. And I think, the current market and economy devalues those things to a certain point. And then you have really, really talented people that never do what they love doing. And, I think that's a big sin on our community. Carter says, Julie implies that all immigrants are banished from working. It is against the law to hire illegal workers. I love people that are from Mexico, and I employ hundreds of them. The difference was they were legal and had to use E-Verify to make sure they were. They are terrific to be on your workforce. They work hard, and they show up every day. Julie says, we saw this in the 1930s. Americans were so desperate that they took these jobs and were then exploited. Are you talking farm workers that were exploited? Because I think, we just talked about the entertainment industry. Do you think entertainers are exploited? People who make below market value on things? I mean, I honestly think that consumers dictate so much of this policy by what they're willing to spend their money on. And it's always, almost 100% of the time, that it's almost like your principles are different than how you behave in society, right? So could you pass up a $200 TV and buy the $800 TV if it meant that you had to pay more for a similar or equal product? How hard would it be for you to spend the more money to do the right thing? And so long that there are more consumers willing to say, I have an iPhone and there's lithium in here, that was mined from an exploited kid, when it comes time to buy another iPhone, is that going to be a consideration that I am supporting the exploitation of children and workers in some country, some other country, just so that I can carry around this iPhone? Or if you sold an iPhone that had none of those things, the lithium was mined in Minnesota, the technology was just and it was assembled here in California, costs a little bit more, but would you buy the phone that was more expensive but didn't do any of the things you didn't believe in? But it's hard when consumers will justify and want other people to do the right thing when their consumer choices means that they're supporting the thing that they absolutely say they don't they don't like or want. And those consumers would have already justified those purchases, like, but I don't have any other choices. Well, the choices get made, right? If a company opens up selling phones and they have a waiting list, then their company grows, their pricing gets more competitive. But if nobody justifies, or no one can right themselves with the increased cost by supporting workers that make a good buck, then they go out of business. And then you do have what we have right now, with lowest common denominators always followed. It's why I have such a distrust in socialism, because you take that out of the equation and what that one domino is going to do with all other dominoes. And it takes a long time to increase value, but you can destroy value in 30 seconds. And government does that all the time. Julie says, we were a cultural desert for a long time. Thank goodness for great venues popping up in our area. And the more we support it, the more money's made by promoters, the more money is made by venues, the more public support we get, the more of that you get. And I like that a lot of these venues involve local talent, where local talent doesn't have quite the draw. So let's just say you're a promoter and you've got a 1,000 person venue where, in order to break even or make money, you have to get to 1,000 people to show up at your deal, right? When you invite a local talent that might be really good, but they represent 25 seats of people who will show up because of the name recognition for that band, versus having a draw band, something that your 1,000 people will absolutely show up, but then your other opening acts, the people that don't have quite the following, then also gets to perform. It's a good model. And I think local radio stations, you support local talent. They used to profile them and put them on the air and get them plays in front of crowds that maybe have never heard them. AI is pretty good at dropping new content. I think Spotify, one of their models was that you might have an unrecognizable song, and if you put it in tandem with a song that you recognize in the same genre, that you get some acceptance from listeners, and you might pick up a new band or two that you didn't know that you loved. And so, yeah, real important that we do support the things that we agree with. And I'm right there with you, Julie. I meet with enough really good, talented people that are struggling to keep doing what they're really good at. And in the merits of an economy, I believe that people who are good at things should make the most money, and that people aren't good at things should struggle to be better at what they do, or find something else that they can be good at. And this is an example of, if it's just so lopsided, who makes it and who doesn't, who makes a penny and doesn't. And I think, when I was a kid, you ask a 10-year-old what they want to do for a living, they're going through the ledger to find out who makes the most money. And if they like football, they want to be a football player. If they like music, they want to be a rock star, an astronaut. And we even did it in high school, where you're what was that person? Forget the role in school, where you talk to them and they put a list of professions in front of you so you can start pursuing your curriculum based on what you want to do for a living. Guidance counselor, that's it. And probably a majority pick their professions based on what the top line salaries were going to be. You had a lot of athletes, physical therapy therapists, high dollar value stuff. And I don't know. I just think, we've always had that in the 70s and 80s. We hit that vein of, we had a bunch of artists and we gave them places to play and fan bases to develop, and then they spilled out to the rest of the country. We were a hotbed. We were an incubator for musical talent. And then you commoditize something that like we've done with social media. And then it's really hard to stand out if you're a musician. You don't think that these people do crazy stuff just so people will pay attention to them? I mean, do you think there's another Jimi Hendrix out there that will never be discovered only because they can't merge onto the scene and get people to recognize and even make an appeal towards their gaze, because there's just so many of those people. And I just don't think talented people should ever be commoditized. And that's exactly what we've done. And, you just take AI, and I will listen to the people pushing up against taking creative people and replacing them with computer doctored or engineered or created musical content, because the fans will love it. If I'm writing a movie or doing a television show and I need some musical background, am I going to go to an artist that can write that music and put it together for the show? I'm going to pick up my phone and say, hey, AI, write me a song that I can have in the background of a scene, a fight scene in my movie, have that created, lyrics made, chords played, and then delivered to me. When I look at how long it takes, right, and how much it costs, which one is competitive? The one that was almost free, that might be not quite as good, but it'll be good enough for the person watching the show or movie, versus now an artist are like, hey, you know what? That was kind of my gig. I thought we got really good at licensing our stuff into the entertainment. It was a good marriage, but I got easily replaced by this new technology. I'm almost done making the appeal to push up against AI. I think the genie's out of the bottle, and I think we should all just know that we're going to adapt through it. And when all of our entertainment stuff has been replaced with AI, we can complain about it then, because I think it's too late. I think that's where we end up, in the future. Even stage performances. How likely would you be to show up at an event where there's a holographic image of the artist performing the music, and how much would you care? So let's just say they concocted Michael Jackson being dead for as long as he has been. He does a show in Las Vegas. They put up the holographic mechanism, and he gives you a full 3-hour show on a stage. Do you think they would sell out that show? Or do you think people are like, that's not really Michael Jackson, he's dead. And if he's singing those songs that I love, like, if he's not there in the flesh, I'm not having it. So how many do you think that show, yes or no, do you think that show would be a sellout or not? Because if we can reconstruct artists to do, in-person venues and people would show up, then we can do the same thing in other entertainment. How many plays can be performed on stage with holographic actors that might not even be real actors? They just might be completely fabricated. Julie says that sounds horrible. And in the end, if anyone who can limit their expense, whether it be a consumer or a person that's putting on a show, if you can limit your expense by creating a sure thing, they're going to do it every time. If you would do it as a consumer, then they're going to do it as the provider of the service. And the only reason they would not do it is if you didn't show up. So we'll take movies, for instance. Matt Damon kind of articulated this pretty well, that when they pitch a movie, they get a bunch of people who will put money in on this movie. And so the movies that get greenlit for funding are the ones that are the surest thing, right? And so if I went to it and said, I got this movie and it's a very creative, brand new story, really no-name actors, but man, the story is just so good. People are going to get just captured by these characters. And then I say, hey, you know what? I'm going to take a Marvel movie and I'm going to do the 7th version of it. And we're going to introduce 2 new characters on one side and 2 new villains, bunch of fight scenes, explosions, whatever. Which one do you think gets funded? The one that's kind of a risk, or the one that is an absolute sure thing. So as the consumers, what are we left with? We're left with movies that have broad appeal, that are very superficially entertaining, appeal to the worst of us, and explosions and sex scenes sell movies. But why do you go see a movie? And as a theater guest, are you more likely to show up to the trilogy, or are you more likely to show up at a movie that you've never heard of before, that's not in the same vein of 50 other movies that you haven't seen? So I have a hard time expressing, appreciation for artistic expressions when the movie industry is just recanning ideas that have been done 1,000 times. And as long as audiences keep showing up, they're not going to make any different choices, except for like the Disneys of the world that go off in left field and will completely abandon a brand because they've got capital to set on fire. And so they'll take a beloved story and make it into a horrible Frankenstein version of that story. And they'll look and say, "Wow, this didn't do very well. Why is that?" And so, like, we're on both sides. But I want us to be a meritocracy, which means the smartest and most talented people are the ones that make a bunch of money, and the people who are just normal, canned, nothing exceptional about them, like, I want them to make less money. And that's just me. 330-595-1600, or messages like Julie and Carter are doing out there on the web, and I'll read your comments during the show. And that, the professions that parents of kids ask me, actually, like, what should I convince my kid of doing in the future? Should they be a YouTuber? What's the next generation going to do for money in the next realm of technology? And we're the industries that are really doing well with where I know I could churn out 20 different ones of these, and they would fit in the marketplace because there's such a demand for these people, are still in tech. And so if you're an AI, right, and development in AI, like, as an engineer, you can find clamoring products that are clamoring for AI engineering talent. But when you look at, instead of the sort of high specializations, what's the regular people going to do when some of the regular people jobs have been converted? Somebody brought up like OnlyFans, and the influencers who have the ability to capture the attention of audiences, and using that capture to lease out to people to sell products, to do to do sort of like pitch work or brand ambassadorship on that. So you're going to have the popular people are going to have technology supporting them, and those influencers are going to make more and more money as it gets harder and harder to get people to pay attention to you. I mean, how many times have you purchased a product that you saw a celebrity carrying around? How many times have you watched something happen in pop culture and watched it resonate, and see people start behaving and talking and making their product decisions based on what they've seen those people do on TV? So if you were to take the smart people, land is going to be in the engineering and the artificial intelligence, and the influencer realm, as more and more companies and individuals want to grow up to have people pay attention to them. That's going to be the next rock star. If you asked an 8-year-old in my generation, they all want to be rock stars. If you ask somebody in this generation, they want to be YouTube stars. And I honestly, in both of those, whether or not you want your daughters to go on OnlyFans and make millions of dollars by bear skinning and catering to the vices of other of gentlemen, it's been an industry in our culture forever, and you do really well. But man, we're just getting so broken. But just the amount of negativity, pornography, and violence that we see on social media, we're getting so, I have to check out every once in a while from being on X or Facebook, because it breaks your brain in a certain way. You just need a break from it, because just how people interact and talk with one another, it's so sarcastic and so negative that it's not how real people act. If you were in, at a graduation party and ran into someone and you said something, like, at least there would be sort of a polite, withdraw from wanting to say everything in the most horrible way that you could. I have friends that have just sworn off of it at this point. And as a big advocate for technology and all the tools that it can become, it goes to that lowest common denominator, and it's not a blessing in your life at a certain point. So I get my news from it. I get, some communication with people. It's a nice, easy way of keeping in contact with certain people. But as far as like the debates, I really try not to throw grenades out there and fight with people, because you could spend a lifetime just having, those fights. Julie says, right now, AI can be appreciated for its creativity. I hope it will get stale. I'm not sure that it will. I had that same thought, like when you had 3D versus the 3D movies. It was a little bit of a, I don't know. It was something that was new, but it wasn't as good as just the regular movie. So every once in a while you could run one, and because it wasn't as good, then it kind of does. It failed for a long time. Like Jaws 3D and all those when the technology was new, it was every movie wanted to produce it, and then it didn't grab enough new people. Like, you don't see a movie. It's a good add-on, right? But people willing to pay a premium for a product that was more expensive was the deal breaker for that technology. But this is the opposite, where AI makes things considerably cheaper, done quicker. And so your expenses are lower, the inconveniences of waiting on something. And you can even make this analog. So I had a customer that they were an inventor, and they used to prototype products. And when they had a prototype, they would actually have to send their product out to a company. It would take about 4 weeks to do, and it would cost them several $1,000s to have a prototype made, because you had the tooling that they had to make, and they'd have to have the engineering that was done. So it was to make a new product that was super expensive because of all the time and expense that went into it. And then 3D printers came around, and we showed them how to use the 3D printer, and they were able to print their prototypes in PVC. And they were able to do it. They already had the drawings that they would feed off to the prototype makers, and they were to print their own prototypes, and it would cost them 60 cents in materials and maybe a couple hours in getting the thing to print right, maybe a couple of redos. But if you compare the two things, are they better or worse? Yes, there was a company that used to do that for them, and it increased rate. They found something that was way cheaper that got them to them in the same day that they wanted the prototype to be. So their lives improved. It got better. Would they ever go back and say, you know what, screw it, I want to not print my own stuff. I want to keep using the more expensive things that takes longer and makes my product more expensive. I don't think that they'd have ever gone back to the old way of doing things. And so the adaptation in the marketplace, when we call it a disruptor, I'm not saying that AI disrupts it to be dramatic about it. I'm saying that it has no choice when given, if you talk to entrepreneurs back in the 80s and 90s, the things that they hated the worst, they're like, man, I really wish I could solve this. And there was just no mathematical solution. And then AI represents a lot of those things that really you hated about what you had to do in business. And all of a sudden those solutions are made. They're all going to capitalize on it. They're all going to jump on it at the expense of status quo. And in some ways it's going to be made much better, and in other ways it's going to be made much worse. And we as consumers got to get used to both of those. And like I said, genie's out of the bottle. So complaining about it is fruitless. And it's about knowing ahead of time that there is going to be a displacing effect of it, and not buying in, not over investing in places that are going to be easily replaced by automations or artificial intelligence. All right, 330-595. I'm going to wrap up here. If there are no other comments, wanted to at least do a show today without my co-pilot and wingman, Kellen. So we can wrap up unless anybody's got anything out there. Let's see. All good. All right, cool. Everybody have a good day. We'll catch you tomorrow. MLO Bros, but we'll be back for part 2 of the mall talk. And if you could like this, subscribe to whatever platform you're on, YouTube, Facebook. We could always use some more people that get notifications when we come online, and it shows your support. So thank you everyone for your support. Have a great day. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to this show on Youngstown Studio. This is original Youngstown content. Feel free to share our videos and tell your friends about us. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook.